G'day. Here at the Regenerative Journey, part of our goal is to educate our followers on the benefits of knowing where their food comes from and the knock-on effects this can have on our health, our environment and our future generations. Understanding the connection has never been more important, and in the spirit of this endeavour, we have teamed up with Highland Beef Pastoral Company, a grass-fed beef supply chain servicing the growing US grass-fed consumer market, who I'm excited to announce are our Season 6 show sponsors. Essentially, this Australian-based business places cattle on their member graziers' properties at no expense to the farmer and provides competitive returns for every kilo of beef produced, allowing their graziers to focus on improving their businesses in a capital-free and risk-free environment. Highland Beef graziers are some of the best grass and animal managers in the country. Livestock are humanely and lovingly cared for while on their farms, and customers are guaranteed a very high-quality, regeneratively managed grass-fed and finished product with full transparency from farm to plate. If you're interested in finding out more about this program, visit hbpastoral.com.au/Charlie Arnott.
It's the whole cycle, nutrient cycle, plant rest, plant growth, soil structure, all that sort of stuff that I started to take on board. And I could see the benefits both above ground and below ground and in the animals. And so that was sort of something that really started to drive me.
That was Tom Mulligan, and you're listening to The Regenerative Journey. From wherever we are, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, recognising their continuing connection to this land, its waterways, the stars in the skies since time immemorial. We pay our respects to the elders, knowledge holders, and to all the generations of First Nations peoples who have nurtured their unceded sovereign lands for over 80,000 years and continue to do so today.
G'day, I'm your host Charlie Arnott, an 8th generational Australian regenerative farmer. And in this podcast series, I'll be diving deep and exploring my guests' unique perspectives on the world so you can apply their experience and knowledge to cultivate your own transition to a more regenerative way of life.
Welcome to The Regenerative Journey with your host Charlie Arnott.
G'day and welcome back to The Regenerative Journey. This is our last episode for Season 6. You'll be listening to it somewhere between the middle and late part of January. Hopefully you've had a nice, restful, festive season, thinking about getting back to work. For those of you who are not at work by now, good for you. I'm sure things will kick off for you in September. September. God, that'd be lovely, wouldn't it? No, February. And I guess for uni students too. They don't generally start till the end of February from memory. They get a massive, massive Christmas break. Nonetheless, God, it's early in the morning here. It's a couple of days before Christmas. It's kind of probably the second last day of official work for most people. It could be the last day. Actually, for a lot of people, they're probably already knocked off because it's the Thursday before the Christmas on the Sunday. Early morning, pumping this last one out. As the boys who I'll acknowledge, I'll do it now, Reese and Sean, who have been with us. Certainly Reese has been with us since day one. Sean's joined the team in this season, scrambling to finish so they can all go on holidays, understandably. Now, Tom Mulligan is our guest. Before I launch into Tom, I just want to have a wrap up for 2022. We are minutes from midnight, or New Year's Eve at least. So only a week or so left of 2022. For you, how has it been? I mean, I guess it's one of those things we do reflect on every year this time. Certainly heading into the next year, we look back, hopefully as part of our, call them New Year's resolutions. I try and avoid using them because they tend to be tainted with lack of execution generally, certainly in my life. So I tend to try and structure that some other way and call it something other than resolutions. Nonetheless, it is that time of year. It is a time for celebration. It's also a time for slowing right down. And I was also seeing the other day something about certainly the 12 or so days from Christmas. It is early, Christmas. Something to do with the Roman calendar the sort of this new calendar that we have, catching up the Roman calendar, or maybe it's the other way around. I can't quite remember. But anyway, it's sort of like 12 days or so of purgatory, which has other significances, certainly anthroposophical considerations there. So it's just one of those. We need to slow down. This 12 days or so between this catch up of calendars and Hamish Mackay will be able to probably fill me in a bit better on all this, but certainly it's kind of this time of purgatory where the old world is catching up with the new world in terms of calendars, as far as I can sort of see. So it is a time to sort of sit and relax and not do too much, because it's sort of in this sort of between two worlds kind of a period. Look, 2022 for us had its challenges, absolutely, like I guess everyone. The good news is we didn't have to suffer floods, like up north, certainly early in the year, Northern Rivers, and certainly more recently down here near Borough, Forbes, Eugowra, Cowra, got smashed with floods, so we didn't suffer that. We've had a really good year in terms of season, and in so much as the theory of there, lots of grass, an easy season. Restocking more than destocking. That's kind of the challenges, as I've mentioned before, which with worm burden and feed quality, but they're things that are not insurmountable. And just busyness, probably too much on this last 12 months for me, I have to say. I've got a really amazing supportive team around me, which take up a lot of the slack, I have to say. Probably too much again, but I'll bang on about that at the end of the episode, I think, and thank a few people. So probably enough of that. Bang on. You just want to listen to Tom Mulligan, who is a farmer, one of the graziers on the team, Highland Beef Pastoral team, who, as you know, have been wonderful in their support of the Regenerative Journey in Season 6. Tom is based up near Glen Innes in the Northern Tablelands of New South Wales. He's essentially, taking over the running of his family farm. His parents are still very much involved. But I met Tom some years ago. I think it was actually at Beef Week at Rockhampton. Some mutual friends, and then we seem to have a few other sort of connections and mutual friends along the way. And then lined up this yarn with Tom via Highland Beef as one of their farmers and their fatteners of the Highland Beef cattle. So just beautiful property up there. We talked about the fires that they experienced there a couple of years ago, the ups and downs, Tom going away and being essentially a chippy in Sydney, and sort of that in itself is interesting, isn't it? There's a lot of parallels with, I'm sure, a lot of farmers, and perhaps those listening. You grow up on a farm, you love it, but then there's an urge or a pressure or a push or something to sort of move you off farm, learn a trade. And the interesting thing is, a lot of the boys and the girls come home again, which is wonderful. And I think it's really important that, children, don't necessarily go to school or even university and then come straight home again. I think it's, you either use that university degree and somehow and just get some experience with it, and, in the context of the real world. And skills like being a chippy, I mean, what a wonderful thing, what a skill to come back and on a farm with. I think that I'm sure Tom's father was cheering when Tom pitched up with his tool bag on, and with the ability to build and that's one of the critical things on a farm, infrastructure. But others that I know and have run into over the years who, gone away and done different things, even techie stuff or, engineering or God knows what other sort of trades and professions, and then come home and those skills have been applied to a farm. I think it's really important, in terms of a rural community that, children essentially don't just stay there. They go out, they learn a trade, they learn, further education ground truth that in the real world and bring it home and then contribute in a meaningful way in their rural communities and the businesses and families, of course. So, that just strengthens the fabric of rural communities with that. And there's also the people who live in or move to rural communities have nothing to do with farming life, and they bring those skills. That's another really interesting dynamic there, that they bring skills that just don't really exist in rural communities, or certainly not to the sort of level or the extent of people who've never farmed. They come to a rural community and bringing with them those wonderful skills that are required, that farmers aren't necessarily find themselves learning or fall into in their lives. Essential is a sort of a flow of information, people and skills, in and out of rural communities. Hopefully more in than out. But back to Tom, lovely fella. He, we had a good yarn. We went out in the paddock, had a look at I think it was mainly heifers from memory that Highland Beef have placed on his farm there. Really beautiful condition. He's a really, really good operator, Tom. He's got great sense of animal husbandry and infrastructure and nice, beautiful, tidy farm. All the fencing he's done. Again, reflection of his building skill set that he has now. But enough of me. A bit more of Tom. I hope you enjoy this interview on the Regenerative Journey with Tom Mulligan. Okay, Tom, we're away. Welcome to the Regenerative Journey.
Thank you, Charlie.
And welcome to your mum and dad's, at least. I'm not sure, who's running the show.
I don't think we know either.
Someone's living room, lounge room.
Yes, this is Bar and Mike's lounge room. We'd like to do it outside, but the days hasn't really turned on for us, so it's probably best to be inside.
I know it's warm and it's in a controlled environment. I'm not sure about how much control I got over this chair, though. Do you reckon is that safe?
Do you want to...
Do you reckon that's all right?
Yeah.
It
should be.
It's fine?
Yeah,
I'm
old mum and dad, those chairs.
So young. Very young. Tom. I hope your parents don't listen to this.
They're probably in the office.
And we're looking at you tell us what we're looking at and give us I'll ask you the question so you can sort of broaden it all, but I interview my guests in their happy place or their farm, with a view, which we have out onto your garden, and the property name
Ban Wyong.
Ban Wyong, that's right,
Yeah.
Ban Wyong. I was a bit confused coming in, and there was
yes. It's been changed since the bushfires. There's a neighbouring property behind us.
That's where the V is, yeah.
Yeah, they couldn't find it when it was burning in 2019, so the council started to put up more property signs and it's
numbers
made
and
everyone
directions.
Confused.
Yeah,
particularly cattle trucks.
So they sometimes end up down there, do they?
Yeah, they end up either down at Wandsworth or or the neighbours.
Which is past your front gate.
Yeah, we've sort of had to up the signage.
Well, I got here.
Yeah.
There was actually the Google machine on my phone was actually very accurate. And we're in a beautiful garden that your mum has painstakingly and grandmother.
Grandmothers. Yeah, they started this one back in the 60s as they migrated from New Zealand and wound up here at Ban Wyong.
Yeah.
They started it and Mum's continued it on and grown it into what it is today, and it certainly takes a lot of her time through the week to keep it looking as good as it does.
Oh, it's amazing. I love it. It's beautiful mature trees. You've got roses and all sorts of beautiful things going on, and probably a bit of I can imagine in summer it's probably quite the sanctuary. Cool.
That's right. Yes, and someone once said, I heard that no matter what's going on out in the farm, as long as your garden's in good order and somewhere that you like to be, then home's not so bad.
Well, you can escape to it, can't you?
That's
like
right.
In the heat of the day, or not see. I mean, I guess it's in the event of extended dry periods when it might look not so flash outside.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think coming in here and sort of leaving the outside world behind a bit, the sheds and yards and whatnot. If you can block a bit of that out, it sort of puts it at the back of your mind for a little while you're in the house.
I think that's a good thing. Always nice to have a bit of a view, but also nice to be a bit of a recluse here. So you grew up here?
Yeah.
Did you grow up here?
Yeah, so I was born in Armidale, and we grew up here and went to the school in Ben Lomond, my sister and I.
Is it still there, that school?
It is, yeah.
Oh, cool.
There was 6 kids. It got down to 6 when I was in year 5, so that was early 2000s, late 90s actually, and then it sort of got to the point where it was almost on the brink of closure. So I ventured down to Armidale, my sister and I, and that's where I finished up at Tas in Armidale. Yeah.
Which wasn't co-ed when you were there?
No, it was the transition the junior school was.
Okay.
And then, it just since we left really, I think only a few years after, about 2013, it became co-ed. And from what I hear, it's going really, really well. So it's a great...
I got a good mate who's got his partner's kids are there, boys, and they're loving it.
Yeah. There's been a lot of families sort of move their daughters there, their sons are there just to sort of keep them all in the one place, and it takes the travel if you've got to go to other cities or towns to have them in the one spot.
And I think just having mixed sexes in a school situation. I know I went to an all-boys boarding school and for 10 years, and it was, I know when I came out the other end, I didn't know what girls were. Well, these alien things.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that. They tried to include us, our year 11 and 12 classes were combined, some of them, so we got to talk to them in the daylight.
For real?
Yeah.
In real life?
Yeah.
Wow.
None of us had makeup on, so it was quite good.
So grew up here, so on farm, happy memories of,
absolutely.
of all that?
Yeah, no, I can remember it was back when we had horses and sort of quad bikes were only just becoming a thing. Family musters would take a long time, and there'd be a lot of yelling and screaming at dogs and horses bucking and whatnot. But, we've sort of probably moved to more of a mechanical age now. Distances travelled and whatnot. Yeah, things happen a lot quicker on bikes, probably a bit more productive, I think. You can get from one end of the place to the other in less than half a day, which was sort of the case on the horse.
Do you remember riding?
Yeah. No, the last pony only passed away not that long ago, so we've just sort of moved into the bikes a little bit now, and being able to carry a chipper and a spray tank and a few bits and pieces for the odd nodder that we have, it just makes life a bit more productive. Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I think often, how do we survive without phones? Well, we had landlines. Did we have to be more organised? Because you knew you couldn't just call someone willy-nilly. You had to sort of plan things a bit more. I guess maybe with horses it was more like, well, I don't want to be doing 5 laps of the farm today. I'm going to maybe plan my route a bit better.
Probably a lot more thought went into it, whereas, that's exactly right. But, we grew up with that, and then we sort of transitioned into when the phones became a busy part of our lives, and they're another game changer that we have on farm. We're lucky enough to have a bit of reception. It is patchy in areas, but Dad and I and Mum can make phone calls between each other reasonably well.
Is that mic on the buggy now?
That's someone going out to do something. Yes, I think it might be Bar.
Oh, really? What Bar? Is that Barbara? No.
Yeah, Barbara. Yeah,
Barbara. Okay.
Yeah, she's off to check. We've got kidding does here at the moment, so she's off to have a look at them.
What's that noise? Is that a dog?
That'd be that staffy you ran into.
Oh, well, you said kidding does, and I thought that sounds like a baby something. Okay, happy childhood. And did you appreciate the garden back then?
I
just
did.
Like Mum's thing.
Yeah, no, it was spent a lot of time here, running around mulching and weeding. And when I was little, probably out of the farm, out of the garden gates, wasn't really somewhere I ventured unaccompanied. Maybe to feed the chooks, but otherwise.
When you were very young.
When we were very young.
Okay.
Yeah. But as we got a little bit older and the lead got longer, we got time on our own bikes and horses, and We could ride to the front gate and just check the mail.
School bus?
No, the school bus didn't come down our road. We had to get dropped in, which is only a few k's into Ben Lomond, so it wasn't too bad. But no.
How many acres here?
We're running 4,000 acres here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so it's...
And has it been 4,000 for some time, or you sort of... Has it been... as a child, was it 4,000 acres you were roaming around?
Yes, it was.
Look at the map over there.
Mike purchased another block, a little block about 150 hectares, an accompanying block that sort of squared our place off a bit.
Yep.
But that was even before my time, so yeah. But in the scheme of things, before we migrated here from New Zealand, the property was much larger and it was split again for the previous owners.
Right.
Through succession and whatnot. It was quite a large parcel of land. But unfortunately, the way it goes, things got sort of diced up, and that seems to be the way places are going at the moment. We've managed to hold on to 4,000, and it's a great part of the world to be.
And you explained that part of the world where Ben Lomond, I guess, is your local little village. It's what's it known for, of this part of the world?
Well,
we're in the New England.
Yeah, it was the highest railway station in Australia for a long time until the rail lines got knocked down. They're TSRs now and people are grazing them, but I don't think the trains will ever return through here. It's just the tracks are too narrow and the freight's too big to get through the mountains.
Really? I heard that they're thinking about opening them up for bike trail.
That's been a thought through the area. It's probably been met with there's people for it and people against it. I personally believe it would be a great thing for the area, because they were talking about making it from Armidale right through to sort of Tenterfield.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of kilometres of rail line there that could be reused and bring the economic boost to the tourists, families,
totally.
and even business opportunities for young people, young and old. They like a little village like Ben Lomond, and they think this wouldn't be a bad place to open a coffee shop.
Totally. Well, we've got people trekking on bikes and so on, and then that just it cascades, doesn't it? All sorts of opportunities there.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, the Victorian ones I think have taken off really well. There's a few down around like Tumbarumba and that part of the world.
Corowa, I know. Nick, my mate at Armidale, his mum and dad used to burn around there on bikes, and they, in their retirement.
Yep.
And it's relatively flat down there too, so it's a good. It's not too challenging.
There'd be a few burning calves, I reckon, around on the Ben Lomond range, but a few good hills to ride down to. But I think it'd be a great thing to see the area. And we had a little CRT back when I was a kid that was a local shop, which is now being turned into a B&B.
In town?
In Ben Lomond,
In Ben Lomond, yeah, right. Is there a coffee shop?
There's not yet. I'm waiting for the day. Yes, it won't be too far away. I think we'll all be pretty excited if a coffee shop turned up there.
Just someone with a van and a
that's right.
machine in the back of it will do. Ben, and also Ben Lomond's known for winters, pretty harsh winter. Well, not harsh, but it's New England. You get cold winters and it snows a bit.
No, it is. We generally pretty well every year. We've had a snow event. Last year, 5 snow days, and this year only 1, and a bit of sleet. We were fortunate enough to be working in the cattle yards the day it was sleeting, and that makes for a pretty ordinary. You can hardly open the crush with the amount of coats you've got on.
Are they the days when you think you start thinking about holiday and like planning your holiday? The prompt.
Yeah. But you always think, well, the saying goes, if you get snow, then generally you're leading towards a good spring. So, you think, well, short-term pain for a long-term gain.
Yeah.
But, some years we don't, and, that's fine. And they can be ordinary springs and summers, but we generally get a lot of tourists up here when it does snow from the towns around. They come up and throw snowballs and make snowmen and
take pictures,
bog the place up.
Bloody tourists. We'll get to more of this area in later on. I've got a couple of probing questions for you about that, just to dangle a carrot for our listeners, just so they might go, I'll stick around. I'll listen a bit longer.
That'd be good.
So childhood here, farm life, school down the road at Armidale, got to year 12 without suspension or expulsion.
Yeah, I was in a reasonably naughty crowd, but I never got caught, and so I never got the punishment. So I was seen as probably the good egg in a bad crowd, I guess.
That was the year of what?
The year of 2007 was.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, a notoriously naughty year, but we all managed to get through it. And yeah, we're still really all close today, which is great. We just got back from a trip overseas for a friend's wedding. He was a school friend of ours. So there's about sort of 12 of us that are really good mates, and we seem to be dotted all over the globe at the moment. But yeah, we still sort of share that bond, that school bond, which is really nice.
It's good. The one good thing about that close-knit, boarding school thing, isn't it? It's is that development of relationships, and which often last a lifetime. I went to a school reunion, 32-year school reunion the other day, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And seeing some people who, truth be known, I didn't even recognise and remember.
Yeah.
Which is rude. I'm pretty good with faces and names, but maybe they were day boys and we just didn't see much of them. And there are others that you haven't seen for a long time but love dearly, and you just go, just straight away you're back to telling silly yarns about what you did at school. It was fantastic.
It's a really school reunions are a very special time. I think they sort of make a big day of it at the school, and rugby's on, and a few beers, and a lot of laughs. So it's
shenanigans.
It's good fun.
So I got through that. What happened in your gap year or your year after school?
So I had an intention of returning back to Ban Wyong to work.
You did?
Yeah, straight away. That was sort of where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And I got pulled up pretty quickly by Mum and Dad, and they said, not a chance in hell at the moment.
Really? Because what was that?
Well, I think the world's a big place, and they wanted me to see a bit of it, experience other things in life. So I toddled off and went to America for a year, and I was a ski instructor over there in Lake Tahoe, California.
So you were skiing in your childhood, that was a thing?
Picked it up through high school, through school in Armidale, and really, had a big love for it there. Unfortunately, we get snow here, but not quite enough to ski on.
I was going to say, I'd see you with a couple of planks just burning down the drive.
Boogie boards on the damn wall is about as close as we get as kids. And unfortunately, Falls Creek's a bit of a stretch from here, so we didn't get down a hell of a lot often. But we did a few trips to Japan and around, which was good fun. You did California and then did some of Europe. As the classic Gappy does. Had some friends at schools over there, and I mooched around on their couches and attended all their soirees. So
not as a teacher or a fill-in or whatever
just a visitor,
a ring in,
and I did a few months there, and that was great. And then came back, and I filled the gap in here, helping Dad for a little while, for a few months, and then I had always done building and construction through school as a Year 12 subject, and I really had a bit of a love for building, and so I went down to Sydney and did my apprenticeship down there for a few years. So I ended up doing the apprenticeship, and 8 years on, sort of in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, doing sort of higher end residential work, which was really good fun.
So where'd you do your training? Your actual, was it a TAFE thing? Was it
Randwick.
Okay.
Randwick College.
And then you were doing you're apprentice. So you're actually doing the work on site, learning that stuff, and then doing the theory as part of the TAFE thing.
So one night trade was where I was supposed to be, and some nights I didn't turn up, some I did, but we got through that and got my ticket. My apprenticeship was pretty well in the northern suburbs of Sydney, so around sort of Turramurra, the beaches, that part of it, and then we sort of lived around that eastern side, and got some contract work with local builders in that area. So that was really good fun, and played footy down there, and school friends were there at uni, and starting to get jobs, and we're meeting friends and girls and whatnot. So it was a really good time. But I sort of got to a point, I guess, where I love Sydney, but it was somewhere I didn't really want to see myself being forever. It was sort of starting to get a little bit stale, I suppose. We didn't really leave that eastern bubble a bit, and I thought, there's more to the life than this. So, and we'd had a conversation with mum and dad and my family about what's happening on farm and what the next step. They were sort of thinking about where they'd like to be and what they'd like to do, and I said, this could be an opportunity, the right opportunity to come back.
How long ago was this, set the scene?
That was 2016, end of 2015, 16.
So that's 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was sort of a decision to make, and at the time I had a girlfriend. She was a local girl from Glen Innes, and she wanted to go back to university. So we actually moved to Yamba, which was kind of a bit of a halfway point, I suppose, to me being here. We're only 3 hours to the coast, and her to be able to study. So I'd sort of drive up through the week, spend the week here.
Yeah, cool.
Living with mum and dad for a year, which was...
just for the week? You were a weekly boarder?
Just a weekly boarder, yeah. I was back to boarding school under mum and dad's roof.
Was it worse at school? Food hopefully was better.
I feel like I was a better housemate than I was when I was younger.
You were a better housemate?
I think so.
You're a bit more tidy.
Yeah, I did a bit of shopping and helped cook. I cook once a week. But no, that was good fun. And it was probably the drive that started to get a little bit tedious, up and back, early Monday morning or a Sunday night. And then Ellen, my then girlfriend, she was sort of finishing her degree and whatnot, and we thought, maybe we could go to Armidale. So she thought that would be something that would suit her as well. So we moved to Armidale and renting a house there, and I was driving up from Armidale, which was a hell of a lot closer.
Easier drive.
Yeah, and we had some friends still from town there, and it was a really good time.
Just before we move, keep going. So back to conversations with mum and dad about farm. If I can ask, was there a trigger? Was there a seasonal kind of thing? Were you kind of nudging in, going, I want to come back now? What was kind of the catalyst for that conversation? Was it more like, I want to get out of Sydney because I'm over it, I need to go somewhere, or was there a push and a pull? What was the dynamics?
There wasn't really a definitive. There wasn't a health scare or anything like that happened. I think it was, at the time, mum and dad were probably talking around the kitchen table about what they'd want to do going forward, and I suppose if the kids, my sister and I wanted an opportunity to come back, and originally I always had, and I suppose it re-sparked the interest, and sort of thought, this is a great opportunity, and it was somewhere I wanted to be. It's somewhere I love. It's work that I love, and we had sort of early succession chats about the direction it'd go and how it'd look and whatnot, and it's still something we're working on at the moment. It's never easy.
So a sister, you're saying?
I've got a sister. She's a physiotherapist down in Armidale. Mm-hmm. So she's close by.
Close by, yeah.
And she's got a daughter and another one on the way.
Yep.
So there's definitely other people to think about, which makes it's a complicated and revolving feast. All our families are growing. We're having our kids and whatnot. So it's a tricky one.
Well, at least you're having a conversation.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Which is kind of the hardest step.
It is.
Also, almost.
And I think at the time, maybe mum and dad were maybe starting to get a little stale here, and they were, maybe production was starting to slow down, and they just sort of were doing enough to keep them going.
Yeah.
And I sort of think when I did come back, that when I sort of got my head around it all, that, things could start to ramp back up. And I think it sparked it re-sparked their interest in it a lot. mum and dad. It sort of gave them a second wind, and you know, they're definitely a massive part of the business. You know, from the day-to-days and whatnot, and decision-making and planning, and even just experience, the wealth of experience that they have for this part of the world is massive. You know, they've been here for 35 years running it themselves, and, you know, they've seen all seasons, they've seen disasters and the good times and the bad times, and they're a really good sort of voicing board, I suppose, to fall back on to see, you know, what do you think about this and that, which is, you know, you can't buy that sort of wisdom. And you know, they love sort of helping out with that sort of stuff and being active in the day-to-days. So it's a good time to be here.
Do they? And I'm sure they appreciate you being here, and I guess what a great combination of history and experience, and you know, different way of thinking, but just it's formed from a different time and over many years, and your experience is not so long, but certainly valuable. That's a pretty good place to be in terms of where you're talking.
Yeah,
you know, you're talking obviously succession. You're talking farming, and you know, how did they? Well, I'll get to that one a bit more about changing the practices, or if you did, and how that all kind of went.
Yeah.
I thought I had a question there about your love. You said before, I can't remember the words. You love farming, or you love doing it. What was that? Was that born of, I guess, living here and it ingrained in you, and you love that, or was going away and doing something totally different? Did that change your perspective because you actually went? You had a reference point. The new reference point being building in Sydney and living in Sydney versus. Actually, that farm life was pretty good.
What life was like here, yeah. No, I mean, life was great, you know, as a kid growing up, and we were always busy doing something. You know, we had sheep back then. It was shearing time. You know, cattle work. There was, you know, fencing, all sorts of stuff going on, and it was always very interesting and exciting. And you know, that was sort of the reason I thought that maybe after school was such a great time to come back. But I think in hindsight, the decision they made to send me away probably kept, you know, and the fire kept burning about that, but just to experience other things, meet new people, you know, just, experience a different life, I guess. But in the back of my mind, it was always still there. You know, I'd be ringing up weekly and we'd be talking about what was going on here, you know, how things were, and Sydney was a bit of a stretch, but, you know, we'd come back as many times through the year as we could. And, you know, even though it was only a weekend or a long weekend or a short holiday, you know, you'd always enjoy going out to see what was going on. And then, I guess the fire just kept burning, you know, all the way through until that point when I was in Sydney and thought, it's just sort of somewhere I don't particularly want to be forever. And farm life, you know, it suits me, and you know, I enjoy the lifestyle.
No, I guess it sounded like it was time. That's not a noisy here very often anymore.
That'd be a Telstra rep, I reckon.
The landline. Someone asking you to donate to someone.
Yeah, that's not all it is.
We had our phones fixed the other day, and it's not on the copper anymore. It's like something, you know, via somewhere. And 10 years ago, the phone's been crap for 10 years.
Yeah.
And I'd ring them and go, you know, it would rain, and then the phone would be crystal clear. It'd rain, like you'd look at it and you'd pitter patter, and then it'd go and be gone for a day. And I rang them so many times, and they said, I've had technicians out. It's out of the ground and the sheep have eaten it. I was like, well, can't you replace it? It's too wet or too this.
Yeah.
Anyway, we put up with it for so long, but I guess we're so dependent on mobiles, landlines just aren't as important.
Yeah, we have a heavy click in ours with the Energizer.
Oh, right. Yeah, I think we had a bit of that too.
A big, heavy click, and people go, what is that? I think, at least the Energizer's working.
You can test it. Is that fence working? Yeah, pick up the phone.
It's running hot.
So let's get back to Armidale. So you were still commuting, you know, I guess daily then. It's not that far.
Yeah.
Farm. When did you, I mean, knowing some of what you're doing now and kind of your practices, at what point which you can extrapolate on. But at what point did what was the catalyst for you to start changing? You grew up here, probably not unlike me, where you did things a certain way and you as a kid and then after school and mum and dad, that's all fine and great. And is there a point at which you went, I want to try this, or I've been reading this book about that?
Yeah, it was funny you should say that. So years ago, back when I was only a kid, in the early 90s, Bar and Mike went and did a grazing for profit course.
Oh, nice.
And they were one of the early sort of learners, I guess, of it. And when they came back, they were pretty energised about fencing and, rotational grazing, cell grazing, all that sort of stuff. And there was a lot of work going on the farm about, chopping country up to sort of make the most of it, utilise the feed, all that sort of stuff. Because the course, they were sort of a bit more set stocked. Superphosphate was going out, and they weren't getting the reaction from the super that it once was. And Dad can recall a conversation he had with an agronomist about super, and he said, it's not really doing what it used to do. And the agronomist said, just double it. And, that started ringing alarm bells, I'd imagine, definitely in Mike's head. And that was probably his catalyst for change, to go and look outside the box. And that was their sort of starting point. And through schooling, I always remember we'd go and see friends' places, and we, local properties around the place, and, they'd have a heifer paddock, and they'd have a cow paddock, and a weaner paddock, and a bull paddock, and a sheep paddock. And, there wasn't a hell of a lot of stock moving going on. Whereas came back here, and nearly every day we were out to move some animals. And I thought, gee, what are we doing? What's going on here? They don't do that. We're doing this.
So what was happening here, I guess, was normal. Like as in that was kind of what
that was sort of their learnings from Terry and the guys at RCS. And then as I got older and they sort of explained it to me what was going on, that it's just it's the whole cycle, nutrient cycle, plant rest, plant growth, soil structure, all that sort of stuff that I started to take on board. And then when I did return, I'd had a little bit of exposure to it through just talking to mum and dad and whatnot, and it sort of started to click. But then when I returned, I booked myself in for a RCS, the Grazing for Profit course. And Mike actually joined me as well. It was a refresher for him, but it was
at Armidale, was it?
Yeah, at the bowling club. Yeah. And still, there was some guys I met, Stuart Austin and whatnot, that were doing it as well.
So when was this one?
2016 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. And it all just clicked. It just made sense what we were doing. And it was probably the backing I needed to sort of push me in that direction, and I could see the benefits both above ground and below ground and in the animals, and so that was sort of something that really started to drive me, and putting in more infrastructure, putting in more wire and water, breaking country down. We still had paddocks that were 200 hectares, and they were underutilised and overgrazed at places, and that was a massive sort of wake-up call, I guess, to start cutting some of it up. And yes, it does lead to more work, but I think the benefits you see in the paddock far outweighs having to go and move them every few days. So we've done cell grazing, like a pizza wedge, a trough with sort of a wagon wheel setup. A lot of the places sort of that design, and then we've moved into some strip grazing, so hot wires and pipelines under hot wires and mobile troughs and things like that in some of those large paddocks, and that's been massive for feed budgeting. We know how many hectares and how many days and how many kilos we've got, what the mob that's in there's removing, and it just just planning, I guess, is so much easier for the non-growing season. But also, we've got a long way to go. We've still got paddocks that are probably too big, and we're still working on cutting some of them down and getting them off dams and into reticulated water. So it's a constant job to design, and that's probably a good. I really enjoy that part of it. being able to utilise country better now than probably once was.
Just a bit more technical questions. So, because we're not dissimilar in that, still cutting up paddocks, or actually refencing, as in taking out the ones in the middle, changing from wagon wheels to sort of, finding it hard to sort of justify a $1,200 concrete trough sitting in the middle of a paddock that gets used 2 weeks a year, thinking, well, that maybe we can pull them out, and we know where the pipe is, and putting risers in and sort of reshaping, using a lot of Western fencing now to just secure paddocks because we've got sheep, more sheep, and it is a constant evolving thing. And then someone says, has some little epiphany about the fencing they're doing, and you go, I'll try that too. And I'm just so sick of experimenting now. I just want to go, what's the best way to keep sheep in? What's the best way to keep cattle in? And then it's a matter of chopping up. Do you use mire grazing?
We do, yeah. Mire's a massive part of our day-to-days. It was after doing the grazing for profit course, I had paper charts on this table where we're recording at the moment, and it was sort of my workspace. And as time evolved, it sort of got a little bit tedious on chart, but then along came Mire, and it was just absolute game changer, I think. Just for the data that we're recording, keeping from livestock to grass to mapping, fencing, it's just and rainfall, that's a massive one too, to keep a track on what's going on. I use Mire every day. I log on there and do the moves.
On your phone when you're doing a move, or you get back here and do it?
Yeah, generally at Smoko or at home at dinner time. It only takes 5 minutes.
To record the move if you've had rainfall.
That's right.
It's a good habit, yeah.
And, we've taken on a lot of agistment cattle, and we're sort of merging mobs and joining them and numbers, and we've got to keep track of what's going on and who's got what and where, and it's been really great for that. We're even recording, how many kilos of feed they're removing from paddocks, rest times. That's another massive one. We can look back and say, that paddock's had 47 days, that one's had 127 days.
Yep.
We know, and but it's in saying that, it's also just a tool, part of the tool box, I guess, in some decision making. And I love that it's got a sort of an average, sort of a benchmark for the property, and whether you're below or above it, and it may suggest that you could put on another couple of thousand DSE or take them off. It's just another sort of tool that we have.
And how many years have you been using that now?
Oh, to be going on 4 years now, I think, 3 or 4 years.
So pretty well versed in that one.
Yeah.
I had a question for you about. What do you? So you know sheep. Oh, you got goats, which you'll get to.
Goats, yeah.
So your cattle, you keep them generally behind a single hot wire.
Yeah, mostly for the most part we do. Yeah, we've got a breeder mob. I'll sort of take you back to pre-drought. We were breeding self-replacing females, and steers were going off as feeders generally to the feedlots, and we sort of buy and trade cattle in between where it suited us. And then unfortunately the drought rolled around, and we'd been destocking since sort of 2017, 18 and into 19. And
how many? What was your breeder size? Mob?
We had sort of 500 breeders.
Yeah.
And that was keeping us pretty busy, and we had, and then followers, and then trade cattle in between that, and that worked really well. But I guess the drought too was an opportunity. We got sort of to the point of I wouldn't say running out of feed, but we wanted to conserve feed. We wanted something on the paddocks. And we had cows that were pregnant, and we made a really tough decision to send them to the abattoir. So we sent like 5 or 6, 7 B doubles of pregnant cows to the abattoir, which was a very hard time. But
is that like into 19?
Yeah, that was pre-spring, and we just hadn't had any winter rain, and spring was just as dry. And, bushfires and whatnot were around. But it was an opportunity to clean up the cow herd, I suppose, and we went through them and kept our best 100. we had enough feed to sort of keep them ticking through, and we calved them down, early weaned, did all that stuff to try and keep the cows in as good a nick as we could. And they joined back perfectly all right. We had 100% joining after the drought, which was amazing. Wow. The weaners went on to feed when it started to rain in 20, in sort of early January when it broke, and the place just exploded. You know, the feed that we grew was just, you just couldn't get enough.
Well, it was a lot like my science around it's a bit not that tight, but from what I understand, like the mineralisation that happens through a drought, you know, and Terry McCosker talks about those, you know, like it's a very big disturbance, a drought, as is a flood or a bushfire. And, you know, a good season or that massive growth is always on the back of, you know, like a bushfire, unless you absolutely cook the ground and it's literally sterilised. That's a stimulation, that's a disturbance, and floods too. But, yeah, so not surprising you had and I guess it's also that it was also, I guess, that perspective on you've just been looking at the window for 2 years at pretty ordinary conditions. Like any growth after that is kind of big.
Yeah, that's right. And even, you know, when it started to rain and, you know, the whole place looked like, you know, that green tinge, almost a golf course. You know, there was we sort of conserved as much, but the feed, you know, even dry paddock, you know, the feed does break down. You know, the wind gets to it and blows around and whatnot.
It's hard to keep 100%.
It is hard.
It's a bit of a myth, you know, to think you're going to keep 100%, even with, as you say, taking stock off well early with your soul to move them or whatever it is, and just expecting that to stay there.
Yeah.
It just literally blows away.
It does break down, that's right. And but yes, you touched on the mineralisation, and that was something that Mike and I had talked about, and he'd mentioned it. He's sort of a little bit more well-versed in minerals, soil minerals and things than I am. And that was a point he made, and just said, you know, that because of these 3 years that we've had, you know, it will do what it's doing. And, yeah, we tore away with feed, which was great. And, you know, it didn't take long to bounce back at all, even though it was, you know, it was terrible. And I think it was interesting, the seasons, because the drought broke in January, it sort of felt like spring. So our seasons were one behind each other. We're not, you know, it was normally our summer was our spring, and then our autumn was our summer, and then winter was autumn. And cattle did really well throughout that year. And I, you know, even through the winter when they normally don't, they were doing 1 kilo in that year. I'll never forget it. And I thought, you know, this is the go. Until the next year came, it was back to cold winters and wet and whatnot, and things slowed down. But yeah, it was a very interesting experience, the drought.
Well, I think what I've kind of been hypothesising a bit is, and not just me, I don't think, is we're now into our third year. So at Burra it was like early February. That's that dog. It sounds like a bat or something.
It's a timing bell.
Yeah. It's slipping. So February 2020 is when the rain started falling at Hanamino. So there was 20, 21, 22. What are we in now? 22. Yeah, so that's the third year. So we've had 2.5 years. I guess it's 2.5 years since the rain started falling. But as we've gone through that 2.5 years with some seasonal variation, but wet summers, you know, I reckon, and we had our sheep, and we were talking before about weight gains in young cattle and so on before, and they sort of, I know at home we sent some away because we just weren't getting the weight gains through winter, which is not something we generally, you know, want to carry young stock through winter anyway. But, you know, and our sheep sooked it, you know, I've said it before, but especially young sheep really sooked it through and took just weight gains were miserable. But it kind of felt like the normal seasonal, the dry period over summer, mineralisation, a little bit of mineralisation, but normal, annuals senescing, doing their thing, natives coming back, you know, those summer actives, a normal season we didn't have.
Yeah.
And whilst there was a flourish of feed early in summer on the back of that, early in the season, you know, after that rain, it's like everything's exhausted.
Yeah.
It's like getting to a point going, I just want that summer back, and I really now appreciate a normal summer. It's like it's a line in the sand for annuals to like finish.
Yeah.
and for perennials to kind of go, I've done my thing, if they get to that point, if they're not grazed and so on, and kind of have a break.
Yeah.
And then there's the next wave of whatever the natives or whatever else comes along and, you know, weeds or whatever you want to call them over summer kind of do their thing. And things just going, we just need a break.
Yeah.
And so there's a quality kind of an issue, not sort of quantity, but a quality issue, which I think really played out in weight gains for sheep and cattle.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like, you know, there could be a huge bulk of feed, but it doesn't have a lot of, you know, it's just guts to it, and a bit watery and can run through them, and, you know, it's not nutrient dense, the grass. But yeah, it's an interesting one, and weight gain's such a fickle. The stars have just about got to align really well for weight gain to happen. There's just so many variables, as you know, to keep animals going and going well.
Looking for more information to assist your regenerative journey? Come join Charlie and his guests around the kitchen table, an online community of supporters with exclusive access to the Regenerative Journey interview transcripts, live online Q&A sessions, a chance to engage with other like-minded people and more. Go to www.charliearnott.com.au/the kitchen table. And if you're not totally satisfied with the value of your membership and wish to cancel it within the first 2 months, we will give you a full 100% refund, no questions asked. Now let's get back to this week's episode.
Let's get on to, we're talking about animals and weight gain. Let's talk about Highland beef because as we know, just trying to find a little notepad here, Tom, my little yellow stick-it notes.
You got them down there?
Which I try not to use because they get caught up somewhere. So I put them in a little pocket because I'm hearing good stuff and I want to get to it later on. I'll write them at the top of my notes here. Lick is the thing we talked about before. What the hell was I just talking about then?
Getting into Highland.
Oh, yeah, Highland beef, sorry, yeah. So weight gains, we're talking about, we're here, Highland beef, for the show sponsors for season 6. And, you know, we met each other, was it Beef Week?
Yeah.
3.5?
I think it was.
3.5 years ago. So it was May, whatever.
18, was it 18?
Yes, it might have been.
Yeah.
Might have been 19. No, it might have been 19. And then here and there on the odd occasion. But really, you know, great to be here speaking with you as one of the Highland beef producers, farmers, graziers. So let's talk about that and your involvement. When did you? Because there's lots that happened between kind of you coming home and, you know, GFP and those sort of things. We're jumping to it. I'll get back to that. I want to have a bit more of a deep dive. But now we're talking about weight gains. Let's just stay with Highland beef.
So I suppose after the drought, we had a hole in our stocking rate, and we had the farmer had a bit of a break because we'd grown a big bulk of feed. We still just had our 100 cows, and we did manage to keep the goats and a few weaners, but there was still a massive deficit in our stocking rate, and the farm was rested. The paddocks were full, and we started sourcing agistment cattle. And at that time, the cattle market was starting to break records. And we were probably a little bit slow to react on the upward trend of the market to buy back in early enough that sort of by the time we thought about, doing it, it was just week on week it was going through the roof. And it was starting to become a pill that was very hard to swallow. And, doing through the RCS and different opportunities that arise with having grass was the idea of selling it to someone else who did want to buy these weaners, and not that, whether they were overpriced or, as other different people will see it as other ways. So we, opened up our doors to producers around Queensland, New South Wales, all over the place to come and place cattle up here for, as long as they like and as long as the seasons kept going and we were managing grass and stocking rates and things, which was a great source of income. It was monthly. And, we were making pretty good money. We'd worked out our adjustment rate. I'd done a KLR marketing school and we'd worked out sort of our our costing and things. And so there was a way to be profitable by having other people's stock on here. And we sort of got to a point where there was still a hole in the stocking rate, and some local agents approached us and said, there's a team starting up this company. They're, doing some grass-fed stuff into the States, heifers. Would you like to have a go? And we said, yeah, that'd be great. So
This is last year?
This was September 2020.
2020, right.
Yeah, so they came from just over the border. And they were sort of flat-backy cattle. We normally sort of rust that Bos Taurus is sort of something that does really well up here, and we're a little bit dubious on those sort of cattle. But yeah, they fired along just fine, and we took a B double at the beginning, just 90, and just to sort of test the waters. And everything was going well, and we'd met with Tony Spear, who's a great guy, and he was really good to deal with, and Tom and Luke at the agents in Armidale were really good to deal with. I'd had things to do with them in the past. So, they just sort of ticked along, and I was working out the finances of it, I suppose. And, if we could get these animals to do what we wanted them to do weight gain-wise, we were far better off than having a paid-by-the-week job. And yeah, so that was sort of something that's why it sort of stuck up and pricked our ears up for it. I took the 90 through, and yeah, I guess there was a really a good feeling about sending kill cattle off that were grass fed on Banwaiong, and it was pretty well all the hard work was done by us, I guess. Finishing an animal's not always an easy thing, but sending those cattle off that were right for eating, that had been fattened here was something that sat really well with us. So that was the first year, I guess, that we'd stepped into it, and then since then we've sort of upped the ante. We've got 369 heifers on here. We went a little bit larger this year. Same story, flatback animals, sort of from central Queensland.
So what breed? What mix of breeds are in there?
There's some Brangus heifers, and then mostly composite, sort of a composite animal. There's a bit more, there's a bit more Euro in them this time, which is always nice to see because they do well up here.
Around here,
and they. Yeah, this winter have ticked along really well. It was a hard winter last year, but this year they've sort of gone to sort of 0.4, 0.5 a day.
Which is good in winter.
Which is really good because sort of traditionally winter's a bit of a snap-off for us, and things can go backwards very quickly if they're not looked after very well. We can get some ordinary weeks where they'll sit around and mope under trees for a fortnight, even if the fog and the rain and the snow comes in. But luckily this year wasn't quite so bad. But we went larger and just found that dealing with them, they were sort of a client, I guess we'd call our Agistes clients, a good way to source cattle quickly and to fill voids in our stocking rate. So we can, ring them up, say, we've got an opportunity, we can take 400 and, pretty well, they'll have them on the truck the next week from sort of they'll have them sourced and sort of something that we see that we can finish. The weights they come as sort of weaners, sort of that 270, 280. We kind of like them around that sort of weight because then we've got the growing season in front of us and we can get them done by autumn. Yeah.
And I guess, the more you do it, the more, and monitoring weight gains and, taking out the variables as one can, whether it's with some supplementation like some lick that, through winter and whatever, as we talked about, that makes it a bit easier for budgeting, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, that's right. So we can sort of work out what it costs us per head per day in lick, and we know what we're getting, as a kilo rate. And you can crunch the figures pretty well. If it's in the green, then you're sort of right to go. And getting into that lick was something we trialled this year, was a green feed lick because we had still green standard feed in the paddock. We used a Rumen Works lick. that's non-HGP, antibiotic-free, a lot of trace minerals that they may not get out of the paddock through the tough times. And it's, definitely went a long way to keep them, fresh, I guess.
Do you know what that cost a head per week or a day? Or
17 cents per head per day.
17 cents.
Yeah, it's the way we worked it out.
Yeah, right.
Given they generally lick sort of around that 200 grams a day they base it on.
Yeah. 200 grams a day.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's interesting.
And it increases if the animal's larger or smaller. Yeah, but that's sort of where we worked on.
Yeah, right.
And I'd seen that product used with some adjustment cattle that had come, and it was actually cows and calves, and they looked great on the back end of winter. So it was something we stepped into.
Have you heard of the you might probably have the seaweed, powders and things, and increased weight gains of 10 to 20%, 30 grams a day or something. But I think that's in a pretty controlled environment for the research, which may be challenging to kind of limit consumption of 30 grams a day. Lick trough paddock situation. But I reckon that'd be that's a pretty significant. I don't know what 30 grams it costs, but I think the numbers work out pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a lot of different products on the market, and I guess it's about finding one that sort of suits your business and your operation. But well, it's definitely a space that's going to increase, and I think also, they're talking about licks for methane reduction and all that sort of stuff. It'll be, and gut bacteria and all that sort of stuff. There's going to be, quite a shift, I think, into lick technology.
So talking about lick, you mentioned that the lick that you are on, there's no, was it Rumensin?
Rumensin, yeah. So it's an antibiotic, which does not go well with where Highland Beef are trying to target their beat. So you have to be careful because those bags aren't really clearly labelled, but there is a note that says they do or do not have Rumensin in them. You've just got to make sure that you're getting the right stuff.
So with the program, no Rumensin as in antibiotics in animals, whether it's a lick or I guess sometimes animals need a shot of antibiotics because they might have an infection, and then again that might take them out of their they then can't get sent off because that's the one of the selling points is they're free of antibiotics and other nasties. What about the story? Because I think one of the great things about the clients in the States who then sell on to customers over there is the story and the traceability. Have you got a good story to tell about that? Do they know about? Are you on Instagram a lot, taking shots of selfies?
Yeah, I have started an Instagram account.
What is it?
It's Banwyong Boar and Beef.
Banwyong boar as in goats, boar and beef. Yeah. There you go, everyone. Follow Tom on that. I better write that down.
So that's just a bit of a fun page that we keep. I've got friends in the city, and I think they enjoy watching what we do, and there's some exciting moments and some not so exciting moments to capture, and sharing them with people. I get a bit of a kick out of it, and it sort of brings what we do to reality, I guess, for people that may not have an idea on what goes on, because the whole finished on grass is to us is a very exciting and sort of a proud thing to be able to do, because there's not a hell of a lot of area in Australia that we can, background young stock so well and finish. We've got reasonably consistent seasons, although the last 7 have been a bit wild. But it's a special thing to be able to send an animal off that doesn't have to have a pellet of grain or anything like that. to be enjoyed by people who want to eat grass-fed beef. The states have a lot of corn-fed meat, and feedlots are a big part of their system over there, and it's just a breath of fresh air, I guess, to be able to share with the world what we can do down here in Australia.
Where do your weaners go?
They generally head to feedlots, sort of at Whyalla.
Angus?
Yeah,
Angus. Yeah.
And then all the trade cattle, JBS takes a lot of them, and they obviously fall into a feedlot system, which at the end of the day is an economic thing for us, and we're having to kill bullocks through another season, adds, their adjustment rate increases, and you can fill the farm up pretty quickly with oversized animals that you're sort of hoping to get off. But that weight, that spec that they've given us to get these heifers to is doable for us. Whereas the steers have generally got to be that extra 100 kilos.
So would you consider? This is not a loaded question. I'm just interested because I'm kind of thinking similar things. The weaners you would normally sell. Would are they at a weight, or maybe are they at a weaning weight that you could then sell them to Highland Beef and then they stay here? You've done the experiment, so to speak, on their cattle, as in, we can get them at 0.4 weight gains for the winter. We can, the maths works out. They're here.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's probably something you already considered, but I guess, and maybe the weights don't kind of work out in terms of induction weights and weaning weights versus what their system is.
Yeah. No, it's something that Tony's he's mentioned to me about, if you've got weaners to sell, we generally hang on to them to grow them out to feed a cattle, but it's and there are, a lot of guys around this part of the world that do just sell off weaners, big runs of weaners to the annual weaner sales, it's sort of 300 kilos, 270 to 300. That's a pretty large market.
And the money's been good.
It has been, yeah. And that's always part of, of someone's business is the economic of it, and you've got to make it work for you. But it's definitely something to think about. Generally, we've seemed to get Highland heifers. We haven't seen too many steers come through as yet. And a lot of our heifers are retained for breeding, so we're sort of we enjoy that part of that enterprise anyway, the breeding enterprise, and sourcing bulls and bits and pieces and playing around trying to breed the best animal we can, sort of with what we've got.
What are some of the, sort of going back to then maybe GFP, did GFP, kind of some epiphanies and things resonated, picked up Maya. Did you come back from GFP going, Mum and Dad, my God, let's do this, let's do that? Did they just look at each other going, oh, no, he's finally got it? What was kind of the trend? Was there did you put the foot on the accelerator a lot and under Mum's and Dad's supervision, or what was that? What was the sign?
Yeah, I think it definitely solidified the information that they'd been feeding to me, and I asked a hell of a lot of questions in that week. I got a sore jaw. But definitely came back here.
Did you open them ask them in a challenging way or an inquisitive way?
Inquisitive way, like why is that so?
Yeah.
And we were lucky enough to have Terry take the school. And he's as you know, he's got a wealth of knowledge. And there was lots of conversation, and even between the other guys doing the course at that time, great conversations, and you learn a lot off other people. But when the week finished and we came back here, it really, I sort of thought, I went, looked at the farm map and thought, some of these wedges are still too big. We can get better density, and that took a lot of time spent fencing, single wire, hot wires, cutting places up. Just basically, utilisation was probably a big part of it, that we were underutilising some of the paddocks and just making that a little bit smaller, and that spent a lot of time fencing and digging trenches and things like that, and getting water in and that. But it just, I suppose it really solidified what the younger learnings I had, and Yeah, and it kind of made sense, just even from plant, like right through from plant growth to soil health. They touched on everything or every aspect pretty well of farm production. It was just a grazing one. We didn't do the farming one, and that was, it was probably one of the best learning weeks of my life, I reckon. Yeah, and even personally, they talk about, your own being and, your own goals and wishes and wants and whatnot, and directions you want to go. And I guess it sharpened my knife a bit on learning more about stock too. I guess, like, feed intake, as they're gaining weights, their intakes increases and whatnot, and the whole thing about DSE and kilograms per hectare and feed budgeting and things that I wasn't really that sharp on. It really sparked my interest.
What other, apart from, I guess, some of the learnings from GFP, fencing, water wire, budgeting, what other kind of practices were you doing here already, your mum and dad doing, that was sort of related to GFP but not core topics in there, or that you've sort of you've adapted since then, like any other sort of soil pasture improvement techniques or any other kind of things? Yeah,
so we've done soil testing, for a long time here, and there's, deficiencies. The Cal-Mag ratio is right out. We've got a high magnesium in these soils up here in the New England with sort of basalt soil.
Oh, yeah.
So, we've spent time spreading lime over paddocks, and we've got a set of cells down on the road here that we've sort of throwing a bit of time and money at. And it's
to experiment, kind of thing,
or probably we're working around the place, but it takes time and money. It's not cheap to do it. So we're sort of doing a little bit every year, working on a cell area. But it's very interesting that the sort of the set of cells down there, its name's Barbara's, its carrying capacity is phenomenal. And its recovery is phenomenal, and we have spent a bit of money and time down there, and it's sort of its recovery is just tenfold on a lot of the rest of the place.
What are the variables there compared to, say, next door? Not the neighbour next door, but the paddock next door. Like, is it a bit more alluvial there? Is it like, are there variables that may account for some of that increase, or is it like you've got almost a control and you're saying no? There's some it's been a good investment in this.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's soil type, over the fence line doesn't change a hell of a lot across this eastern side of the property. But mineral deficiencies, we're spreading boron and things like that. Just picking up those deficiencies, it just, if we could do the whole place, it'd be fantastic, but there are restraints in doing that. But what we've done, it's sort of 40 hectares down there that we've worked on. We've got more to go. It's not perfect by any means, but it's a start.
That reminds me, conveniently, that we are, like as in maybe tomorrow or yesterday, or maybe late last week, released dates for our biodynamic workshop at Danthonia. Up at
Inverell.
At Inverell there, or Inverell Glen. I think it's like the second week in February. So if anyone wants to know that, book themselves in, go to charliearnott.com.au, look at events, and that's the event. I think it's the second mid-February next year. So that's 2023, depending on when you're listening to this. So, because I'm reference that because that will help with availability. Of nutrients, Was this a lot of super? Well, you said your dad put super out here.
Yeah, it was that was, back in the 60s, and clover was fat lambs and whatnot, and super was going out. You couldn't put enough out. I guess it's probably the learnings on what super does to soil structure. It'll grow a great bulk of feed, but what's going on underneath the soil may not be so pretty. And so, we're sort of, if we can say, well, healthy soil, healthy pasture, healthy cattle, It's from the soil up, I suppose, and spreading these minerals is one way that we try and get that achieved.
What else? Some soil amelioration, if that's the right word.
Yep.
What other things are you doing out there in the paddock that's experimental or?
Yeah, so I've recently bought a disc seeder.
Mm-hmm.
So
what brand?
It's a Conochet.
Oh yeah, an old one.
It's about as old as you and I put together.
Really?
Maybe
cool.
older.
It's someone. That's not possible. What is it been reconditioned and put snazzy things on?
Done a few bearings and whatnot. Got it jazzed up. But yeah, it's something that I'm interested in. Inoculating seed with by Highland Biologicals, a guy down the coast, and
just
trying to think of his name.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's
I'm gonna. Oh, that's terrible because he was at. Where was he?
I've got the jar. I've got the bottle of it on my passenger seat.
I know that's terrible.
But anyway, he's down around on the sort of the east coast here, and around Coffs Harbour, I think it is.
Yeah, that's right.
It does a bit of work up around here.
Yeah,
Lee Fieldhouse.
Lee, that's it. Well done, done. Yeah, he was. I can't remember where I saw him last. It was up something up here. I know where it was. It was at Windy Station at Corindai.
Yeah, right.
It must have been May last year, and that next day I interviewed Stuart Austin up in some seedy hotel in Tamworth.
He'd love that.
Hey?
He would love it.
He loved it. Yeah. Actually, it was my room. Was it my room? His room had the spa. You reckon? He was touting off about how wonderful it was in my crappy room. And that's where it was, and he was there with his wares, and that was, I can't remember, that was a local regional Landcare catchment wide. That was a bloody good day, actually.
Yeah, so Lee's, he's got a couple of guys up here that are using some of his product, like Jason Simmons at Armidale. He's also a guy that sort of does a bit of consulting on soil, plants.
What's his name, sorry? Jason
Simmons. At the
Simo?
The Overseer Saddlery.
Oh, yeah.
He's someone that I've approached before and bought some of this inoculant out. It's a biological.
Inoculating the seed that you're putting into your machine.
Yeah.
So what is it? A mix of what?
So it's a pasture blend. Just a New England pasture base that probably would like to reinvigor some of the native
perennial stuff.
Yeah, perennial stuff.
So what's in that?
Oh, it's clovers, cocksfoots, phalaruses. Fescues, you name it. There's a few in there, but also trying to do some more of this multi-species stuff. Turnips and things like that. To be tap-rooted things to get that nutrient cycling going would be somewhere I'd like to head. We do have a bit of a problem with Chilean needlegrass, which raises its head in sort of the summer. And so I suppose with the stocking rate and, density on that, trying to sort of, make it a little bit more palatable. But, it's definitely seeing a bit of a change with getting around it with higher stock rates in smaller areas, a bit of trampling, knocking that seed to the ground rather than, larger paddocks that they just walk around it, and they need to get a free run and cattle and sheep and goats and whatnot never go near it. But, by sort of decreasing the paddock size and upping the stocking rate and keeping them on the move, they sort of treat the paddock as, graze everything.
Clean it up.
Yeah.
Try at serrated tussock, and I don't know if they're related. They're certainly grasses. Serrated tussock down our way. I don't think we've got any serrated tussock, and also African lovegrass. We've got a little bit of that somewhere. Hamish Mackay or Martin Royds from Braidwood. He had serratic tussock, and he kind of worked out. It was a bit of a funny yarn. The Braidwood was a Bungendore Music Festival's on, so and of course they've got cubicles there, and everyone has a wee and so on. He collected all urine.
Yeah, right.
From which probably wasn't just urine, I'm sure, at a music festival. So that might have had something to do with it. Yeah. Anyway, he collected that and then he sprayed it on his serrated tussock, and he found it would pretty much knock it out.
Yeah, right.
And he reckons it's the nitrogen, the ammonia in there.
Yeah.
And then he went, well, there's an easier way. So he was getting like half handfuls of urea.
Yeah.
And then putting it on tussock, the tussocks of the serrated tussock, and they were dying.
Yeah.
And then the thinking is it's there trying to accumulate nitrogen.
Yeah.
And so if you put nitrogen on it, it goes, I don't need to be here, and basically kills it.
Yeah, yeah.
And you don't, as opposed to maybe, I don't know how selective, how many selective herbicides there are for chili and needlegrass, but maybe as an idea, you get yourself a bag of urea, just don't have it near diesel, and then throw a couple of handfuls and just see what happens.
Yeah, no, it's something we sort of don't really want to be spraying willy-nilly with it. We do a few boundaries with neighbours and stuff to keep it off fence lines, but broad acre spraying, because there's a lot of good stuff in between it.
Totally.
And you've got to, and someone once wise told me that you've got to look at the good, not the bad, and that's sort of something that I suppose my philosophy is to focus on the good stuff, not so much the bad stuff, because it'll eat you up and spit you out if you worry about it too much. But there's a lot of tools out there and things to try. It's a revolving feast, and no season's the same. It'll come up worse in some years and not so bad in others. Like particularly these wet years, it hasn't been anywhere near as bad.
Okay. Well, is that because you're in competition?
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah.
Some of those front paddocks you drive in, they're beautiful and green at the moment. We've just started our growing season really only a week ago. By sort of summer, it'll start to rear its head.
Yeah, right.
And that's sort of why some of those paddocks are a little bit smaller. We can sort of trample it down, and it's competition. Get the desirables up through it, and sort of.
Well, is there any chili and needlegrass near the house?
Oh, I reckon there would be. Yeah,
just go find a little tuft and go and drain the spuds on it and see what happens.
Yeah, Mum and seed on the mower. But maybe she can weigh on it. There'd be a few plants around. Yeah.
But you can put that to an. I've only just met her, so it's not for me to.
We're up for trying
present. I want to just get back to early weaning. You said you weaned early that time. I was having chats with our vet, Tom Graham, who's been fantastic for us with sort of changing a few things, for our production systems and weaning. We weaned far too late this year, just gone, and then especially the second calvers, so they've had their first calf and then weaned them too late, and they're struggling at the moment with calves on the ground, and it was just made us look at that whole sort of. The whole system. And Tom was saying, from a science point of view and a physiological point of view, weaning at 10 weeks, was it 10 to 11, 12 weeks of age, a calf, because they're epiglottis or their glottis or something. So there's a sort of a channel in their throat.
Yeah.
When they're young, the milk, when they do, have a drink, it goes pretty much into their gut, and there's 90% into the first part of their rumen. It's a 90% efficiency or effectiveness of that. And post that day, that 10 to 12 week period, there's a change in their sort of physiology.
Yeah,
and then everything goes in. They start eating grass and whatever, and there's a 50% or less efficiency there. So so in that point of view, weaning at that age. It doesn't necessarily throw them back, because if they stop having milk, it doesn't change a hell of a lot. Some people would probably say, well, and understandably, there's that whole thing about being on their mother and mothering and nurturing, or whatever. So there's that consideration. But it was interesting that 10 weeks, and even with lambs at 40 days. And I was like, that's. I mean, for some, it's a real consideration. I know on the drought, reluctancy to wean early, but really, is it that early?
Yeah,
when you consider all those things.
Absolutely.
Do you know what age yours were when you weaned them?
So they were born heifers started calving in August, and it was obviously getting dry. And then the cows started in September. They're a little bit later, and then so September, October, November. It would have been 3 months. It was beginning of December. We put them in the yards.
Well, there's your 12 weeks.
Yeah, and they were.
But
they were in good order. Mums were the fat was starting to milk a bit off their backs. The calves were in good order, and we just thought, if this is going to keep going, and the feed rain wasn't coming and whatnot, so to keep mum looking good, and the calf, pretty well just had to come off, and they went onto a hay ration and some pellets in the yards. It's something we don't really ever do, but we just it was just another bit of trial and error, and the calves, they presented really well. There was no, time lag in weight gains and whatnot. They were firing along, and the girls got joined the following that year. At 300 kilos, 320.
Yeah, so they were at weight, notable weight.
Yeah, and the steers went off at the regular time, so it wasn't a huge. We didn't see a massive production loss through that, but I think the biggest thing was to keep the cow in good order for rejoining as we got 100% that year. It was just like wow, because it was great.
Well, that's certainly something that I've been looking at my notes here when I spoke to Tom. It's certainly something I've been much more aware of is that getting them into calf and in that second mating, and then having that second calf and just giving them all the good stuff like the nurturing and so on, because that's where you can lose a lot of money and a lot of production just by dropping the ball there.
Yeah.
What other practices that so multi-species pasture cropping, bit of soil action, a few minerals and things.
Yeah.
Anything else that jumps out as a practice that's do you have to plant trees here at all?
Yeah, so mum's pretty big into gardening and planting trees, and we've ripped tree lines and put in a lot of poplars along the drive. Some tree lines.
You mean non-natives? How rude.
And some bigger tree lanes down on the western side, more like corridors, and they were done a few years ago now, and the trees are up and looking great. But the dry spell really knocked a lot of trees around, and then from the rain, even the ground's that wet, and we get howling winds from the southwest, and they blow out. We're losing a lot just through wind.
Natives or some of
natives.
the exotics?
Natives, the white gums. They seem to blow. They'll snap like a paddle pop pretty well.
Well, they're really surprisingly shallow rooted.
Yeah,
they're not like a big deep tap root like a oak or a whatever. A
lot of stringy bark down the western side. We can get windstorms through here, and there's one paddock on the far eastern end, and it's beautiful part of the world up there. And went in one morning after a massive storm, and I think we've lost 50% of the trees in there have gone over. Yeah, it was quite a sight. And we try and if we see suckers in bad spots like along a fence line, we might take it out. But anything that's growing in a paddock, we'll try and do our best to keep it.
Happy to let it go.
Yeah.
I think that's dare I say, important. That's why up there.
Yeah.
Dieback, is dieback something that was up here? New England dieback, was it a problem? Is it less of a problem, or where's that all up to now?
Yeah, no, we haven't seen a massive problem with dieback. It's more, I think it's just the ages of them. They're getting to that point in their life, and a lot of the black sallies starting to keel over. Around Armidale, I know they've definitely had bad experiences with dieback, and some of the hills around Tilbuster, just died in the drought. It was just bloody dry, which is, and that's a massive around Mount Juval. Huge areas of trees. So, we're pretty happy to let them grow. And we've even, we've got a tree block down on the far western end that's, we're looking at turning into a conservation area. We can still graze it. And
under some covenant kind of thing.
Yeah.
Who's that with?
We were approached by the LLS.
Okay.
Maybe a sub-branch from them.
Is that Northern Tablelands LLS?
Yeah, that's the one. Yep. And then, they want to make it a koala sort of habitat. But, there's, it's relatively lighter soil down there and its carrying capacity is not huge. So we only graze it sort of for a few weeks of the year.
So that's not a big impost on you?
Not a huge problem, no. So, it's something that we've been looking at. And, it's just another part of trying to, keep the world treed.
Tell us about goats. You got a few?
Yeah, we've got a few.
When did they turn up? Did they turn up, or like out of someone, or did they? You went, hang on.
Yeah, there's a few that might, they just turn up. But no, they were bought as an enterprise from Mum and Dad back in the 80s from Winnering, Western New South Wales, and they
went out there and got them, or there was
they trucked them up here. So there was a few producers around and a few of their sort of friends that got a mob each, and they were using them to eat blackberry.
Yep. How'd that go?
Yeah. It would have been very interesting to be a fly on the wall when they turned up. Feral goats they were, and they were dropped down to the yards, and they made old silos sort of with high chicken netting and ring lock and stuff to keep them contained, to try and sort of humanise them a little bit, get them used to seeing people. And they got, I don't know, over time they sort of, and it was only sort of 100 at that point, and then Mum started crossbreeding them with cashmere bucks to keep the numbers up. And so they were shearing cashmere just to make a little bit of something back off them. And that I remember, doing that as a kid. And then over time we ended up getting more for the carcasses of the cull, wethers and does than we were for cashmere, because the market started to slide south.
Yep.
And so we moved into a meat goat, which is now boar and Kalahari. And we sort of crossbred and whatnot back over boar bucks, and over time they've just sort of evolved now into a full boar and a bit of red in there. They're a meat goat, so they're just the same as a self-replacing herd. We keep the does, sell all the wethers. They generally, we were sending them to abattoirs and whatnot.
What do you get for a kilo, like compared to lamb? Is it?
Yeah, it's not too bad. I think it's about $8.50 at the moment. It's been up and down a little bit, much like the real job. But we've sort of taken it to the next step by sourcing local butchers to take them.
Local being?
Well, Brisbane to the New England and whatnot. Yep. Trying to build that area a little bit, because it's nice to sell your own product and see it hanging in the butcher, and we're getting really good feedback from guys. They're crying out for it in the cities, which is great. So that's sort of another little enterprise that we're poking along with. We seem to be breeding them quicker than we're selling them. Unfortunately, we've joined 600 nannies this year, so we may end up with 1,000 kids marking in November. So the numbers will be getting up. Yeah.
Now, how's fencing containment? How's that all work?
Yeah, they're pretty good. They're sort of, we keep them under sort of 7-wire planes. And they graze in the cell areas like the cattle do. The cell areas are single wire, but the perimeter lines of them are heavily fenced. Are sort of, I guess you call them elephant proof. So
those perimeter wires they're
planes with hots,
so alternating. What, 3 and 4?
Yeah, and goats.
Okay. Is there Western fencing?
No, it's just like a lot of it's concrete with steels.
And
steels.
And insulators in the hollow.
Yeah, and then the old split posts and whatnot.
Yeah,
but the goats are they're a nomadic animal, and they sort of enjoy being on the move. So if you find that, and that fits in pretty well with our philosophy, they kind of, if we keep them on the move, they don't want to move themselves so much. They won't go looking for a move.
If you do it, you kind of let them or do it for them. You said you split the paddocks up with a single plane in the middle. Wherever, not
so a wagon wheel
Yeah.
may have 8 wedges off it, but the perimeter is
very secure.
secure, so we can let the goats run through behind the cattle.
Wow! And tell me how much power's going through that single wire?
Oh, it's running pretty hot. It'll restart your heart. It's about 10.5 out in the west side.
Yeah, well, you'd want that. That's fascinating. A single wire is keeping a boar goat.
Oh no, the cell lines aren't. It's the perimeter lines that are keeping them. So we cell graze the cattle.
Yeah,
and then the goats sort of get a quick run behind them.
Oh, but they have access to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I'm with you now. Right. Yeah, so that's a bit like how we were doing our lambs.
Yeah,
cattle. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
It's an evolving sort of area, and we're trying to do up fences as best we can and replace and whatnot. But
do you say goats going to go in after the cattle?
Yeah, we try and keep them in behind them.
Yep.
But we have the same restraints, as the sheep guys do. Worms and barber's pole and things like that. It's still a thing that we have to be wary
bad
of.
barber's pole this last year or two.
Yeah, not
or worse than normal.
I've heard some bad resistant stories around the place, but we haven't been too bad. We didn't lose many goats at all, which was good. And I think that's a huge part of it's keeping them on the go, moving them around. Keeping them on fresh pick. As soon as they start to sort of swallow in their own camps, then things can start to get a bit nasty.
Let's go to fires. You mentioned earlier about the fires nearby or next door where they couldn't get to the neighbours. Did you have fires here?
Yeah, we did. We had...
in what year was that?
It was November 2019, yeah. I was going off to the G-Bung races in Walker, and I got there, and then I pretty well turned around and came straight back home. There was...
and next week on the Regenerative Journey, my guest is Tom Mulligan. He is a farmer up in Glenninnis, northern tablelands of New South Wales. His family farm there, doing some amazing things. He's a member of the Highland Beef Pastoral Company, farmer and grazier group, and doing wonderful things with them in collaboration, fattening their grass-fed animals. Did you get much burn here?
We lost a couple of sort of heavy tree
great
blocks.
Yarn with Tom. Lovely. I've known Tom for some years now. It was just great to sit down with him.
We didn't lose too much pasture.
Family home, have the chat, talk about farming, talk about his life,
big
talk about Highland Beef. It's a good yarn. That's next week.
Yeah, a lot of
Tom
the
Mulligan,
scrub burnt, which looked great. When the fires are out, it cleaned them up. But the regrowth is phenomenal. Fire is what some seeds need to get going, and that's what happened. It's a cycle. It'll grow and die and fall and burn again. Probably again in my lifetime. It was a very sort of a challenging few weeks for sure.
With that regrowth that you're now getting, I just want to write that one down. How are you going to manage that? Is it something like, I don't know, or you put your goats in there, or
So funnily enough, the goats do eat wattle, which is what's shot back pretty heavily. They'll chew it down to, they'll sort of stand on their hind legs and chew it. But unfortunately, wattle gets up to sort of the height of the ceiling. It's not terrible, but it's definitely there. And even eucalypts have shot like you've never seen. Like anything, they'll be out competed with other trees and whatnot over time.
So that presents as an access kind of a issue potentially, like just getting animals in and out. And
getting them out's probably putting them in there is all right. But getting them out's an issue. We do spot spray along our boundary lines just to keep the fence lines clear. Just because of the fire, jump boundaries and jump containment lines and whatnot, and it sort of sparked regrowth pretty heavily in both sides of the fence. But if we can keep the lines clean and whatnot, then access makes life a lot easier. Had
your dad had experienced fires like that in before?
Yeah, so funnily enough, it was like I think we were talking about 79. He said the exact same thing happened.
Same direction,
just a.
And regrowth and everything?
It really shot up and died and fell and just pretty well, you'd say it was a powder keg, really.
Yeah. Ready to go. He had it all ready to go by 2019.
And, but that's what nature does. And, you know, we've just got to roll with the punches.
I noticed driving into Ben Lomond on the left-hand side and then in Ben Lomond, and then it looks like your front gate a sign about some turbines.
Yes, that's been a topic of discussion around the community. There's been a few companies approach landholders around here about the possibility of getting some renewables going, some wind turbines, and it's been met with, I suppose, open arms and other people not so happy about it. Probably, infecting their way of life and this is a nice, quiet piece of paradise up here. And so there's two sides to it, I guess. But, it's been a pretty big topic because there is a wind farm not far from here, up at Maybole.
Oh, what's that called?
It's White Rock. White Rock, and then...
so that's west of Glen?
No, it's south of Glen Innes, runs between here and Glen. With a sort of
on this western side of the highway?
Yes.
Okay.
And then Sapphire runs almost, you'll see it like Danthonia, that sort of around along that ridge line there.
Between Danthonia and Glen, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of pretty well.
You drive almost through it, from memory.
Yeah. And there's a hell of a lot of turbines through there, and they really, the government's talking about making the New England a renewable capital of Australia through solar farms and wind farms and whatnot. So, it's a bit of a watch this space, I think.
Is there? I've noticed it. I know it. Knowing a few people at Walker, and there's been a few recent public meetings and developers there. And I don't. Look again. I battled wind farms for 2 years straight some years ago, 10 years ago at Burrawa, and stopped one that was going to be literally within 1.2 kilometres of my house. So I was happy to have done that. It was exhausting and nearly killed me, but and now there's a few wind farms turning up there. My view on wind farms is I'm pretty stuck on my having experienced what I did. But I understand at Walker too, public meetings, and I don't know what proportion for and against, and it's always going to be fors and against for those sort of things. But it's interesting, again, what I experienced, the tactics haven't changed a hell of a lot in terms of the approach in the communities and how that even the reaction of the community is exactly the same, because it's the same issue that is divisive, that is the fors and against, and the host and the non-host, and who's benefiting and who's not, and the community funds that they kind of, which I call pretty much blackmail. And that sort of thing. So I was interested and I'm being aware of the ones up further north, but I wasn't until today aware that sort of, I guess, the potential encroachment around here. Yeah, no, it was going to be a fairly, they were very close to here. We even, they wanted to put them on Ban Wong here. So, there's been a bit of kickback. And I think that's the issue too. Kickback from you guys or from neighbours?
From neighbours, from us.
So you're on that side of things.
And it's sort of the big push really was around the village. I think the quality of life for the guys that live in the village was going to be pretty ordinary. They were putting them very close to school.
I was going to say the schools. That's a concern.
And that's the issue too, is the hosts and non-hosts, and it can be a little bit messy.
It is a tough one because you can't blame anyone for. The biggest incentive, and this is what we experienced firsthand, was developers turning up saying, "We're going to save the planet with these turbines." And making you feel bad if you weren't on board. And then, throwing the money around the contracts, and that's a whole other thing. Kind of that's the premise of it all. But at the end of the day, they know full well the motivation for farmers is the money per turbine, per year. That's drought-proof your farm, all this bollocks about drought-proofing your farm. It's like, well, there's nothing to do with the drought. It's just like it's money in the bank, whether it's a good year or a bad year, and all this sort of just the tactics. And I understand, having spoken with a few people near Walker, it's the same deal. And they had a public meeting. And what we did at Burra, we had public meetings ago. We invited all the developers, and there were 2 or 3 of them at the time, like different ones, different things. And we said, you are invited. We'll give you the stand for 10 or 15 minutes. You can tell us all about these wonderful things.
Yeah.
You can have a seat, an open forum and a debate and whatever you want, like it's totally, all open.
Yep.
And we said, what we do is we would have seats on the stage with signs on them saying who's here. And so we'd put signs up for them.
Yeah, right.
And say, this is Bob from whoever.
Yeah.
Of course, they never turn up. But there'd be empty seats sitting on the stage, identifying everyone. These bastards didn't even want to turn up.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. No, it's a hard one. And then I think it's quite sort of fickle. Like they've changed hands, developers over the time. Like
they do.
Yeah.
Name one wind farm that hasn't started with that has started and finished, as in from the initial. I'm walking onto someone's farm to bait them with a dodgy contract to the turbines turning. Yeah. I don't know if it's ever happened.
No, that's right. Yep.
So I mean, look, I don't want to bang on too much about it. My view is pretty clear.
Sound like you're getting worked up.
Oh, it was a really challenging couple of years for my family and business and the whole thing.
Yeah.
And it was, so there's that sort of, not scarring, but there was that significant
thorn in your side.
And I just see it rolling. I think hasn't, have we not learnt? Have we not kind of looked? I mean, because we got a fellow called Stephen Cooper who was an acoustician for. Pubs, and he was a really, really well respected acoustician. He'd never had anything to do with them, and we got him on the job, and he went, I cannot believe. He put his monitoring gear up all over the country, and he said, I cannot believe the ridiculous noise regulations that aren't actually regulations, they're just bollocks. And he's, dare I say now, a world-leading acoustician in that space. Yeah. Dare I say independent, because he's not paid by... Well, maybe some community members, like throwing a hat in the money in a hat, and not developers. And I think he was like kicked out of the New South Wales Acousticians Club or whatever it was, and all this sort of. Anyway, again, I won't buy. But it's quite a. I just watch with interest as to how this thing goes, and that's and anyway, I've got a pretty strong view on solar and not so self. Solar that's in a house that's running the fridge. No brainer.
Yeah, that's right.
But some of these other big solar projects that are going up that I just don't know. I question the micro environment impact.
Yep.
Community use of resources, recyclability.
There's all that.
Efficiencies. I don't think it's like all renewables are wonderful and they're going to save the planet.
Yeah. It's one of those things, too, and about the community dynamic, it's torn apart parts of this area.
How long ago did it sort of kick off? Like when did they turn up?
Yeah, 20... I think they started in about 2010. They started building them. Yeah, they've finished those too, but there's stage 2 to go on, and they want to continue them this way.
In the precinct,
it's sort of been stamped out a bit.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, that's interesting. And again, like the voice of the people, people are speaking, and I think it's great that they feel passionate enough to stand up.
Yeah, and there's a solid little group in Ben Lomond that are really making noise about it. Yeah, which is great.
Well, that's good. That's good. Just conscious of the time, Tom. It is 1 hour and 40 in. What we're going to do after this, we're going to have a drain the spuds. You're going to go find a bit of Chilean needle grass out there and wee on it.
Yeah.
And then...
I haven't. Too many cups of tea.
You notice you got your legs crossed there. And we'll come back and just do a little 15-minute Q&A, if that's all right, if your time permits, for our Patreon members who support the Regenerative Journey every month with a $10 or so kind of contribution, and they get these Q&As. They get release. So you here will be released to the world on that video 2 weeks before the actual episode comes out on podcast. Right. So those Patreon members get the good stuff early.
Yeah.
And transcripts of the interviews, and also a monthly webinar with me and one of the guests. So one day you can turn up on one of the months and have a chat on a Zoom. I won't impose on you in your mum and dad's house again. So let's wrap it up there, mate. That's been so good. I'm really great to fill in the gaps, because I've sort of been aware. We've chatted often about your activities up here, and really good to sort of put some colour to it.
Yeah, it's always good to come up and see for yourself, for sure.
That's right.
Massive.
It's actually, and then what I discovered, it's actually worse than I thought.
It's shit house up here.
No, what we're going to do after this, do a Q&A, is head out to the paddock and have a look at some of these Highland, these animals out there, which is
awesome,
which is fantastic. Right, mate.
Very good.
We'll
Thanks,
clock out.
Charlie.
No worries, Tom.
Awesome.
Thanks for your time.
Good on you.
Well, that's a wrap for season 6 of the Regenerative Journey. A few thank yous just to sign off for the season and the year. Well, I guess you'll be listening to this in January, so we'll be into a new year. But certainly season 6 will be finished by then. Biggest, or not biggest. I won't have favourites, but Reese, who's been our amazing producer / editor. Somewhat director as well, in terms of sort of how we do things and the tech we use and sort of stuff. From Jaeger Media has been amazing. He's got a side banana this season in Sean. Excuse me. And between the two of them, they've rolled out an amazing season 6, I reckon. Some of our most wonderful interviews. I think we had such good feedback. We always get good feedback, but some, I love it when people send in, comments and so on, and say what a significant influence or change or, sort of a important interviews we're doing, and the information that we're providing and the inspiration for them to progress their own regenerative journeys. So big shout out to Reese there at Jaeger Media, who's done a wonderful job under trying circumstances, given my somewhat or sometimes spontaneous, unorganised nature. Lastminute.com seems to be a bit of a theme we'll have to address in season 7, Reese. That's for me to work out. So we've got Reese and Sean there. Big shout out to my family, Angelica and Mike, his little and Lordy, Venus and Persia, who my stepdaughters too. Not that they have too much to do with the podcast, but they certainly probably wonder why sometimes I'm not around or I've ducked off to all this other weird stuff that I do. Thank you for your patience, everyone there. Also, and Angelica's little intros. She does, if for those who don't know, she does the that was Walter Yena at the beginning of every interview. For each person. Michelle has been a wonderful addition to the team from July. Some of you might have met her there at RCS conference in Brisbane. She's just brought a whole new level of, I guess, effectiveness and go forward and sort of organisation to the team, which is wonderful, and I really appreciate her help. And such a so enthusiastic, and not having had anything to do with farming really before, or certainly not even regenerative farming. Conscious person she is, health wise and living wise, but certainly has made a big contribution to what we're doing, and will do so in the future, I trust. You, the listeners. Big shout out to you, because if it wasn't for you, this would be pointless. I just, it's happening more and more, and it's really, it's wonderful, that often, at an airport or a restaurant or somewhere. I was at the Lord Dudley pub in Sydney just the other day with a mate, and a fellow said, I think his name was, I'm going to forget. Steve, Simon. Anyway, lovely fella. He just said, I'm really enjoying the podcast, and, I love this one or whatever. And it's the most beautiful thing, because not knowing them, but they know of the podcast, and obviously getting enough out of it to bother to come up and say good day, which I think is just wonderful. So if you do see me somewhere and you listen to the podcast, don't hesitate to say good day, and because I just love to know, who your favourites are, and why, and I'm always fascinated with who listens. A lot of our listeners, I think, just a huge number of our listeners aren't even farmers, which is really interesting as well. I guess we do cover a lot of topics that don't necessarily relate directly to farming, in terms of practices and geography and that sort of stuff. But hopefully the content is, it's broad enough that it touches a whole lot of other different industries and vocations and interests. So if you see me, say good day, please. So listeners, you are you're amazing, and just a big thank you. Please don't hesitate to sort of, subscribe and leave comments and reviews and all those things on whatever podcast platforms you're on. Maybe do that now. If you got a minute after this is complete, this season 6, really appreciate those, and I'll be talking about them in season 7, and certainly, highlighting that's what we're getting, the lovely feedback we're getting. And if you got some other feedback too about other things, don't hesitate to put that in there. Maybe don't add it in the review though. Please don't give me 1 star and say, look, you can probably improve on the, sound quality or something. Big shout out to Highland Beef, of course, who've been the sponsors for season 6. Fantastic group of men and women there, internally, sort of the admin and the front of house and the sort of the people involved in the actual business of Highland Beef, but also a big shout out to all the farmers and the graziers who are the member parts of the Highland Beef grazing and fattening team in Eastern Australia, which is growing very quickly. And if you have any questions about your potential involvement or the sort of the concept of Highland Beef, don't hesitate to jump on their website and ask some questions. Drop me a DM. Very happy to steer you on whatever direction is required to get you the information that you need. But look, we're thrilled that Highland Beef has sponsored the podcast. It's given us a number of other interviews in terms of David Carter and Tom, the one you just listened to. So that in itself was really interesting and good access to those people, and sort of put a bit more farmer content into season 6. So big shout out to Murray and Tony and the team for their involvement and their support for the season 6. Last quick one is to our Patreon members. We had a Patreon member webinar last night, our monthly webinar. Blair Beattie was our guest. I just love it because it was so many interesting conversations peeled off from that one with Blair. Blair's such an open, honest, sort of transparent, dare I say, vulnerable person, in a really good way, in a positive way, that he's just so honest about it, his life and what he told us last night. But then the sort of the connections that are made, Blair's looking for farmers' footprint content essentially, and farmer stories, and we've got a huge number of farmers in Patreon that have got amazing stories that that Blair can tap into, and just the sort of the possibilities, looking around the screen there last night with who was on the call, all the wonderful things they're doing. So if you want to sort of join that Patreon crew, don't hesitate. There is plenty of content coming away between seasons, so don't think, I'm going to join Patreon and there'll be nothing going on, because there's nothing happening between seasons. It's probably even more reason to get on and be a Patreon member, so that between seasons you're actually getting some content. The Regenerative Journey content, you'll be getting Q&As from behind the scenes. So after every interview I do with any guests, apart from the ones that lead to bolt out the door, like Jacqueline McGlade, we do a Q&A, a 10, 15, sometimes 20-minute Q&A, which is extra content that only those on Patreon get to see. You'll also get, when we get back into season 7, you'll get the videos of each interview a couple of weeks before the actual interview comes out on your podcast platforms. You'll get transcripts of all episodes, and we've got some other ideas about what other content we can give you, and create a potentially another level of subscription there. And there's also going to be an opportunity to sort of subscribe to Patreon for free and get some very basic content or access. So that's just like another social media channel essentially that I trust you find some value in, given it's free. And then if you so choose to step into other higher levels of subscription or into a subscription model, then hopefully that little the access into that team is the way you might start. So that's going to happen in 2023. Very excited about that. Getting our head around the sort of the use of Patreon and the wonderful platform it is, and creating a really strong dynamic with all these different things that are coming our way and opportunities that are coming our way, and essentially Patreon's our go-to group of people that if there are opportunities, if there are discounts, if there are sort of things going on in my world and sphere that useful and interesting to the world at large, and then it's my Patreon community that's going to get that stuff first. That's enough for me. That's it for the season 6, and just hope you have a wonderful 2023. Season 7 is on its way, but as I said, if you're hanging for content, for something to listen to something to watch, to something to get involved in between season 6 and season 7, do not hesitate to jump on Patreon, and we'll give you enough, not so much like just enough, but like we'll give you the content you need to get you through to season 7, which I'm really excited about doing. We've got some amazing guests lined up for season 7. And also looking for any, if you've got suggestions, drop me a DM for anyone that you'd like me to interview in season 7. Okay, that's enough for me. So enjoyed season 6. Lovely, wonderful, dynamic group of people on the other microphone when I do my interviews, those guests. What an amazing bunch. All my back house people. And you just have a lovely break between seasons, and hope that 2023 kicks off and is an absolute ball terror. Talk to you soon.
This podcast is produced by Rhys Jones at Jaeger Media. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to subscribe, share, rate and review. For more episode information, please head over to www.charliearnott.com.au.